So as you saw from the introduction, this tutorial is going to be focused entirely on using Maya's NHAIR system. And to do this, we are just going to add hair to the girl you can see in the scene in front of you. We'll also investigate using the hair systems to add fur to the teddy that she's holding. And we will also add a bit of fluff to the sheet which is wrapped around her. Now, rather than just create a sphere and add hair to a sphere, I thought we would focus more on how you would use hair in a real world setting. So in a production environment, for example, you'd maybe be given a scene like this one in front of you, which has been posed, textured, lit and pretty much ready to render. It's then your job to take it and add the hair and fur. By doing this, we eliminate all the other aspects which are involved in creating this scene. We're not going to look at modelling or texturing or anything like that. This tutorial, unlike my others, is just going to be purely focused on one area, just so we can explore more of the advanced areas of NHAIR, like collisions, colours, rendering, and all sorts of other things like that, which I just probably briefly touched upon in my previous tutorials. So you have this scene in front of you. Now, video 1 will not render out as you see her here. Just to make things easier and to simplify this specific scene, or the earlier scenes, I've stripped out all the shader information and just applied a basic Lambert. To be honest, we're not going to be doing any rendering until later on in the tutorial anyway. We're just going to be doing modelling and looking at the hair, so we don't need to worry about rendering then. When we do come to rendering the hair later on, we'll see how things go, but this scene takes a while to render, so we may stick with just the basic shaders until the very last minute, and then we'll bring those back in for our final render. Now, before we move on, I also want to mention that the render we're looking at here is obviously a draft render, so the final render which comes with this tutorial will probably look different. It will have had more work done on it, but again, we're not focused on any of that. This tutorial is purely about hair. So let's get rid of this image. As I say, this is what we're going to be working on top of. So let's close this down. Now this is the scene. If we switch to our perspective view so we can see it, we have our lights, we have our backdrop, the sheet, the teddy, and obviously the girl. Now we could go straight in, go to our NDynamics drop-down menu here, go to NHAIR and create hair straight away, and that will apply hair to the girl. But the problem is it's going to apply it to all of her, and we only want it to be around her scalp area. Let's just turn on default lighting. I'm just going to press Control Space just to bring that up to full screen, just so we've got a little bit more to work with. And I'm going to open my outliner, and let's just hide everything we're not interested in up to now. So let's just select all of this, Control H to hide, so we're just left with the girl here. So as an example, if I just go to NHAIR, create NHAIR, as you can see, it's just created this weird hair standing out from everywhere. It's too long, it's not spaced out nicely enough. You have a weird clump of hair here, obvious missing patches all over, so that's no good at all. We need to be more specific. The easiest way to do this for this particular character is to duplicate the scalp area, and then we can use that to apply the hair to. So just open up my outliner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate her, call her scalp, and then we'll hide the main girl model. And we're just going to go in, select by face. We want it roughly around that sort of area. We want it to come down to her sideburns like so, and then around the back of the head there. Now please ignore the back of this model. Because this is rendered from this view, the back hasn't had much work done on it. There's no point doing work on areas that are never going to be rendered or seen. So let's select around there, make sure they match. Fill those in. Like so. So I might just select that area there and there as well. And we may go in and just select these few just around the ear, like that. So I'll just press Shift to invert that selection. And then we'll just delete that. And that just gives us the scalp. Like so. So if we now go End Hair, create End Hair, we still have a similar problem. The layout isn't very good. We've got 2 hair clumps at the front and the hair is too long. So let's undo that. Now the layout is determined by the UV layout. So let's go to our UV texture editor and just see how the UVs are at the moment. Now remember, the UVs were laid out currently because she's textured. So obviously you'd have the rest of the head down here and the rest of the body laid out on the page. Now with the way the head is, it's split open at the top and it's laid out right on this tiny bit of the page down here. So let's recreate those UVs. We'll just do a planar map straight down on top. So using our y-axis, we'll project that down on top. Let's just select those UVs, right click on this, and we're just going to unfold these quickly. Horizontal, vertical, like so. Then we'll just rotate these round. So this is the middle line here, so I'm just going to select these UVs here. Align those so they're all aligned down the middle. If I press 1 to turn off smooth mesh, you'll see they're in a straight line now. Let's invert that selection. Unfold none. So it's only going to unfold the UVs that are selected now. Click apply. And that's just unfolded those a little bit nicer. Obviously, we could do with tidying up the UVs a little bit, but let's just see how the UVs, how the hair looks now. So let's just scale it up a little bit so it fits in there a bit better. So let's just do a quick End Hair, create End Hair. As you can see, that's a much nicer layout. Obviously, it's not perfect because we haven't gone in and defined our settings yet, but we've got a lot more hair clumps on there. We've got a lot more of these little red areas which are called the follicles, which dictate where the hair systems come from. Just like real hair, you have your follicles and the hair comes out of the follicles. It's a similar system here. So let's undo that. So now we have our scalp model ready. We can now think about adding the hair system to this model. So let's just close our outliner. Just bring this back. Let's just delete the history, delete by type, history. Let's look at our initial End Hair options. So let's just go to reset. So your output, Paint Effects, NURBS, Curves, or both. Now I'm just going to leave this as Paint Effects. Obviously NURBS Curves will create each hair as a NURBS curve. Paint Effects will create it as a Paint Effects curve. We'll just leave it at Paint Effects for now. You can experiment with the others if you like, but I pretty much like just to stick with Paint Effects. U and V count. This is how it's going to be laid out across your UV page and how many times. So we had it at 8 before. Now again, you can always fill in these settings and then adjust them, undo and adjust until you get the right flow over the scalp that you need. So 8 may not be enough for us, so let's up that to 15 and just see how we go. So if we add this in now, let's click apply. So there we've upped it to 15, and now we've got more hair spread over the surface of the scalp. So let's undo that. Now if we just jump down to here to hair length, let's drop that down to 1. Click apply again. That should give us a much shorter hair. You can see it's still quite long, so let's undo that. Maybe drop it down to 0.25. Click apply again. So that's getting much shorter. We've got a nice layout over the scalp, but what we have to consider is each of these is going to be editable. So the more of these we have in, the more we're going to have to play around with and edit later on. Now there is another option which can help us reduce the amount we need to edit, and that is to fill out the rest of the hair with using passive fill. So let's drop this down to 8 again. We'll just click apply just to see how that affects it. As you can see, it's quite sparse. We have these open areas here. If we set passive fill to 1, click apply. Now that has added in these blue follicles here, and they are there due to the passive fill. Let's just undo that and add in a couple more just so we can see. Maybe 3, click apply. They've gone off a little bit, but it doesn't matter. So what we have is our red follicle there, which are our main control curves. The blue follicles are the passive fill follicles, and what they're going to do is mimic what the control curves around them are going to do. So if this red curve is control curve here, if that moves around, the passive fill ones around it will sort of blend between that follicle and any others that are influencing it. So you won't be able to edit the passive fill ones. They're just purely there to fill out the scalp. So let's jump that back up to, we'll maybe have that at 10. We'll just set our passive fill to 1 for now. And again, play around with these settings until you get sort of a flow over the head that you're happy with. Hairs per clump we'll leave at 10. That's basically how many hairs per follicle, or clump as Maya refers to them as. We're going to leave everything else just as they are, and we're going to place this into a new hair system because one doesn't already exist in the scene. We need to create a new one. Let's click apply and see how that looks. So we have our red follicles there, which are our control follicles, and our blue ones here. And again, you may want to just play around with these a little bit more before we go on to the next video. But that is basically our hair added. Now, at the moment it looks a bit odd. Maybe it's a bit long. What we can do is select the hair, go to N hair and use a scale hair tool like so. As you can see, that'll allow us to just drop that down. Now, before we move on to the next video, which I'll do in a second, what we're going to do now is I'm just going to increase the time slider so we've got a lot longer for it to play. And that's because when we click play, you'll see the hair starts to fall because it's being influenced by gravity. And that is the start of adding hair to an object. As you can see, gravity is affecting it now. And now we can start to go in and start to style this, start to fill it out, start to add in colour, maybe add in other effects or sort of dynamic systems to affect this. But all we've done in this first video is just introduce the basic steps it takes to add or assign hair to a certain object. So let's leave this video here, and what we'll do in the next video, we'll just pick up where we've left off and we'll start to fill out the hair and give it a bit more of a style.